Hi, this is James Headley. Welcome back to the Living in Naples channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about the process of buying a home here in Southwest Florida. Get into a bit of the mechanics so that you know what to expect once you've identified your new dream home and what you can expect at each stage of the process until you're able to move in. So as always, if you like what you see here, think it might be useful to others, please do like, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. And with that, let's dive right in. Biggest and first sort of hurdle is to make sure that you're prepared to make a strong offer when you have identified that home. Be able to put yourself in the best position as a buyer. And I talk about that in other videos as well. So just very quickly here, number one, make sure that you've got your financing in order if you're planning to take out a mortgage on the home. Two, know your budget, certainly related, and be sure that you're working within that budget and in an overall sense. Three, know what's important to you in a home or in an area so that when you've identified a home, you'll know that it's right for you and you're ready to move forward with that strong offer and move forward in the process. Once that's all in place, then we can move on to more of the mechanics of writing the offer. First and foremost, I'll just say I've been negotiating contracts for more than 2 decades, almost 3 at this point, in the hundreds of millions of dollars. So I'm here to be a strategist. I'm here to be a sounding board for you and here to work with you with your specific situation. No situation is the same, and we'll be sure that we position you in the best possible way and write an offer that's right for you. With that said, as far as the actual offer itself and the way that works, I would just say that number one, make sure that you're reading the market correctly. So obviously sales price and an offer price is probably the biggest element. In most cases it is. There's certainly exceptions to that. But you don't want to go into a strong market like we're in right now and try to lowball. Similarly, if the market shifts, you don't want to get overly aggressive and find yourself bidding against yourself. So just really getting a sense of what that market looks like, admitting what that market is, operating in the market that you're in and not wishing for a different one, and presenting an offer that's right in that particular market. The second aspect of the contract that I would like to talk about is, really the neighbor contract here. That's our Naples Area Board of Realtors. That's a contract that many, if not most, transactions are executed under, and the reason for that is a very localized contract, which takes into account some of the factors here in the area, and really presents a nice balance between protecting buyers and protecting sellers, with the ultimate aim of looking around corners and making sure that everyone gets to the closing table and feels good about where they are and how they get to that closing table. So just know that the NABOR, or Naples Area Board of Realtors contract, is likely going to be the contract that you'll be presenting an offer on, one version of that or another. The key elements of that contract, and certainly this would apply to the Florida Realtors and Florida Bar contract as well. Many of these same clauses or elements are inherent in both contracts. Some of those key elements are whether you're going to write a standard contract or an as-is contract. Key difference there being that with an as-is contract, the expectation, it's not necessarily the ultimate reality of the way things play out, but the expectation is that the seller will not be undertaking any repairs for defective items that are identified if and when there are inspections that are conducted. On the buyer side, from an advantageous perspective, in exchange for giving up that potential for the seller to remedy any defective items, the buyer does have a pure due diligence period, inspection period, however you want to think about it, typically about 15 days, in which to back out of the contract without any penalty at all whatsoever, getting back their escrow/deposit funds, earnest money, however you want to think about that, for any reason at all whatsoever. So It's a bit of the trade-off there. Certainly, there are advantages to both, and we can talk about which is most advantageous to you in your particular situation. Some sellers will require that a contract be one form or the other, so you may not have a choice there, other than to say that you don't want to proceed with whichever it may be. But we can talk about what's right for your particular situation in most instances, and present on the right form for you. With that out of the way, there are some contingencies that you should be aware of. I mean, certainly I've just sort of referenced inspections. So in a standard contract, you can have the right to inspect, and you do it in as-is as well. But in a standard contract, you will have an inspection period. The seller will have an opportunity to respond to your request for remedy of inspection items. If they choose not to remedy everything that you've requested, you have the right to cancel the contract, again with no penalty, with you getting back all of your earnest money deposits at that point. Other contingencies that are often introduced will be the financing contingency. So if you will be financing the home and you have any concerns at all about the ability to secure a loan on the terms that you're expecting, if you're concerned about appraisal gaps, or simply want to make sure that your bases are covered, there's any concern at all on your part, or real concern on your part that there could be any issues with the financing coming through in time, and that you'd be on the hook to pay cash for the purchase, then a financing contingency may be appropriate for you. A third contingency that comes up rather frequently is sale of existing property. So if you have another investment home, second home, or if you're selling your primary home in order to purchase and moving to Naples full-time or nearly full-time, you may want to include a contingency that says that you will need to sell that existing home. Ideally, that home is close to being sold, or that home certainly is on the market at the point where you're introducing this, because this and all the other contingencies are certainly going to be reasons for a seller to devalue, in a sense, your offer versus a very clean offer, as it were. But just know that's a possibility, that sale of existing home contingency. And then a fourth somewhat frequent contingency that comes up is the visual inspection contingency, and this is certainly for out-of-town buyers, whom I work with a lot. This is a case where if you aren't going with an as-is contract that gives you that due diligence period where you can cancel for any reason, you may want to include, if it's a standard contract, a visual contingency clause, which allows you a set period of time, typically a week to 10 days, in which you have the right to visually inspect the property. So this would be a case, in real terms of, practical terms of, I go in, we FaceTime, I show you the home, I give you my, my perspective on it, and you like what you see, but you definitely want to see it in person before making such a large purchase. So we can set in our contract offer, but you don't want to let it get away to someone else. So we set in our contract offer, say a 7 to 10 day period to allow you time to fly down, drive down, whatever the case may be, and have a look at the home. And if you don't like it for any reason at all whatsoever, then again, you can cancel without any penalty. So those are just a few of the primary contingencies that we may see, or we may introduce in the contract. Moving beyond contingencies, some of the other terms that you should be aware of, and that we can talk through what's right for you. Timing. What's the right closing date for you? If you are financing, I recommend at least 45 days in this market to allow for all the underwriting, etc., to work its way through the system. That's typically a pretty good number, and most decent mortgagers will be able to handle that for you. Bankers will be able to handle that for you. Is there post-closing occupancy? Or a leaseback? Does the seller need to have the home be able to stay in the home for a period after the closing date? And are you willing to do that? And on what terms are you willing to do that? Other considerations that might come up: furnishings. Is the home being sold furnished or unfurnished? Turnkey? What exclusions are there? All of that will be spelled out in the offer that we write. Are there leases in place? If this has been a rental property, does the seller already have commitments to renters that must be honored? If so, we'll get the terms of those up front so that you know what you're going into, and if there are ways to cancel those if you desire to do so, or certainly at least know what kind of rent you can expect as those leases would transfer to you and the funds be due to you going forward. With that said, let's move on and let's assume that we've written a very strong offer. The sellers come back after whatever negotiation or no negotiation, and they've accepted the offer. So now what? First and foremost, we will line up inspections. We've got a menu of inspections that you can undertake here, depending upon the home. Some may be more appropriate than others, but certainly, in almost every case, I would recommend that you do a standard systems inspection. So checking structure, checking the appliances to make sure that they're working, that the water is working, hot water heaters are functioning, air conditioning is functioning as it's expected. That there aren't any noticeable defects in the home, wet spots, leaking, mold, and mold is related. There is a separate mold and air quality inspection. Given the humidity here, this is in many cases, if not most, a good inspection to add on and choose from the menu. Another that you can choose, which it's certainly much more common up north, and I think probably more warranted up north, is the radon inspection. Since we, as a general rule, don't have any basements here, radon isn't quite as big an issue. Certainly there are instances where there are very high radon counts in homes and condos, you always have the option to do the radon inspection as well. If you're purchasing on the waterfront, somewhere canal front or excuse me, or bayfront, you're going to want to do a dock or seawall inspection. If you're financing, you're almost certainly going to be required by your lender and perhaps by your insurance company in some cases to do a 4-point and or wind mitigation inspection as well. So we would want to add that on to the list of inspections. So in any event, once we've put together, I'll work with you. I will line those up for you and set that up so that you're in touch with the correct inspectors and everything is lined up within the inspection period or due diligence period, depending upon which contract. The inspections take place, and then you have an opportunity to decide how you would like to proceed based upon those inspections. Again, with the opportunity to ask the seller to remediate, or in the case of an as-is contract, you can ask or you can simply walk away if you have concerns about what has been found in those inspections. Assuming everything's good on that front, and in parallel, we'll talk about who you would like to have handle the closing for you, whether that's an attorney or whether that's a title company. Here in Florida, you do have the option. Title companies often have, and in most cases do have, attorneys either on staff full-time or on retainer. So there's always an attorney having a look, even if you go the title company route. If it should be a simple closing, it can tend to be a little bit cheaper going the title company route, but if you have any concerns at all about any issues coming up or complexities in the contract and complexities in the closing, an attorney is always a good idea and can be worth a couple $100 extra, as it often is the case here. So we'll line that up, and I'll have recommendations for you about that and everything else that I talk about. You also want to get in touch with insurance companies to make sure that everything's set up when you move in, and I certainly recommend talking to insurers even earlier in the process as you're thinking about homes, just to get a sense of what you might be looking at as far as your overall budget with insurance, particularly if you are close to the water, because those bills can be a bit higher than you might expect. Utilities, cable, and the like. I'll give you options, pest control, etc. So I'll give you a menu of service providers that you might want to get in touch with, just so that you have those services in place on day one or soon thereafter, as the case may be, going forward. But you'll want to make sure that that's all in place as you approach closing. And that brings us to closing. So you have the option certainly to come and close in person at the title company office or at the attorney's office. Many do not. Many buyers do not, and they'll just handle as a remote or away closing, with everything handled via FedEx and electronically, and in some cases with remote signing agents that will come out. I do a couple of title companies that I work with that will send someone to your home wherever you are to have you sign in person there versus getting on a plane to come down here. They'll come to you. So we'll get that set up as well, whatever works best for you. And then the pre-closing walkthrough, the night before closing or the morning of, either together, or if you're doing an away closing, I'll go on your behalf, have a look around, make sure that everything that has been promised to have been remediated. We'll get paperwork on that, but that everything has actually been done, that nothing else has popped up in the meantime, so that you can walk into that home when you finally do walk into it and feel very good about your brand new home and what you're walking into. So that's a very brief overview of the process, but I hope that's helpful to you to get an understanding of what you might expect. Happy to answer questions about any of those stages and get into more detail. And again, every situation is different, so we can talk about what's right for you at your convenience. So be in touch anytime. And again, appreciate you tuning in. Definitely like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you in the next episode.